Good morning. This is Professor Anderson with a little bit of feedback for your writing assignment number 1, rough draft. Thank you for downloading this as a PDF and then submitting this additional copy. I'm not sure what happened. I think it might be the version of Word. For some reason, there were several students, or 2 students actually, you and another one. I just could not open them up. I apologize. So I'd like to share with you that when I review written work, I do it in a 2-phase process. The first is what I call the nuts and bolts, just to make sure all the components are available and visible within the paper. So it's a very cursory look at the paper. And then I go back for a little more of a fine-tooth combing, and I call that the nitty-gritty. So the nuts and bolts, I know this assignment has 4 major components, and the first needs to be in paragraph form. I see that. The next is bulleted listing, and then a table, and then finally an analysis in paragraph form too. So if I just cursorily scroll through your paper, I see you have all the nuts and bolts available. Now let's go back through a little bit more of a fine-tooth combing and looking at the nitty-gritty. So this first section, you're asked to give some background information about the place that you've selected to highlight some communication barriers, and then some specific details about it. So I see what it is that you're referring to, and I see that you have detailed the type of communication that takes place in there. Give me a little bit more of an understanding. I'm not sure. It looks as though sometimes you telecommute and sometimes you don't. When how often or frequently do you telecommute? And then also, when you're in the workplace environment, what is it like? Are there 100 people, 200 people? Is everyone in a cubicle? Are there office spaces? Are they all lined up together? So oftentimes, identifying a communication barrier is a little more about defining the setting so that the barrier can be very specifically targeted. So a little bit more of a description of the workplace itself. You have listed these barriers in the proper form, and you're using what's called parallel structure, and that is the focus of one of our WSWS, our workshop worksheets. So parallel structure means that items that are listed in a series are listed in the same fashion. So you have items here listed in a series, and then you have them highlighted. You're using the same type of bullets, and then also you have stated the definition using the same formula or the same format. So that's very important to note and maintain throughout any kind of writing, especially professional writing. The next, you're supposed to give an example of a situation where a barrier was in place. Identify the barrier or inhibitor, and then analyze why that barrier was in place over others. So here, I understand what you are giving the description of a type of incident or a type of situation, because this is kind of generic. As I understand it, you're sharing conference calls in general. And then you're noting there are various barriers in there, and you're absolutely right. What I recommend that you do is take and create a new cell here, a new row, and give it a label. Just say in a conference calls in general, and then divide each of these barriers into their own row. So discuss how the organizational barrier comes into play, then discuss how the environmental barrier, and then the competition barrier. The purpose of doing this is to help you target and focus in on the one element, and then giving the analysis of that, how that element is in play. And this is a key skill to look forward, or you will be utilizing in your final paper. And then in your analysis, this is so I'm going to back up for just a second. So if we take a look at how, identifying this one situation, or describing this one situation, identifying the barrier, and then analyzing how the barrier comes into play, view this table as your data table. This is the specific instance, this is what we're going to call it, and this is why we're going to call it that. So if we were able to think of this in like a mathematic formula, say, this might be like 2 + 2 is the situation. The answer, the identifier, is 4. And the reason is because when you add digits together, you add, I don't know how. I'm just trying to give a very generic analysis of it, because this table really is your data. And when you give your analysis in the end, whoops, I just scrolled past this, you want to use those terms from your data table into in this analysis. So I hope that that was helpful. I think this is excellent. This is an awesome beginning. The only thing that I would really recommend that you polish before you turn in your final paper is to, again, give a broad heading for this example and then break down each of the barriers, describe them as separate barriers. And that's what I would recommend. So I look forward to reading your final copy.